Welcome. I'd like to talk to you today about the Guideline public company data. After logging in, you can look at the applications. Over here underneath Public Market Financial and Transactions, you'll see Guideline public company data with Tagnifi after it. Click on this to access the database. Why do we need this data? Underneath our standards, the market approach is required to be considered. Inside of that market approach is the Guideline public company method with the emphasis on public. Public companies are transparent, they have prices, and you should be able to look at those and see if they are a proxy for the subject company. We believe that this data is the best data source to find public companies. Why? Well, we partner with Tagnifi, who puts the data together. They have the #1 data quality out there. There are hundreds of quality checks. So basically they are looking at the public filings with the SEC, pulling that information into a database. And as they pull that information in, there's hundreds of quality checks. There's 100% transparency with this information. You should be able to trace the information back to the SEC filings without issue. And the other thing that we like about this data is that there is consistency. It's the #1 in data consistency. So it's standardized over time and also with its peers, which is a problem. Every company presents its financial statements slightly differently, and Tagnifi is able to consistently standardize that across its industry. So how does it work? Once you bring up the data, we have the #1 item up here is the search. Underneath the search, there's a standard search and a detailed search. Underneath the standard search, we've put in the minimum amount of items that you would want to look at to search for things. So for instance, if I put in SIC code 3312, and I need a valuation date, I'm going to come back and talk about this in a minute. And I need a cutoff date. And I will also come back and talk about this in a moment. When I press search, I can also put in NAICS codes or description. So 3312 has to deal with the steel industry. And if I look down here in the steel industry, this is what comes up for SIC code 3312. If I had put in the NAICS code 33110, I wouldn't have received this one, wouldn't receive this one, would not have received this one. If I put in steel, I probably may not have gotten the oil and gas services. So it just depends on what you're searching for. Why doesn't this have a ticker symbol? The reason is because it's no longer publicly traded. At one point in time, this was publicly traded and there are filings for this company, but today it does not have a ticker symbol. The other thing that I wanted to show you is that you can have an SIC code or a NAICS code with the correct information in it, but you'll come over here to this segment and you'll see a different segment. Remember, these companies are filing with the SEC and that information is being pulled from those filings. To be transparent, to be able to trace back to those filings, we have to, or Tagnifi has to be able to do that. So if the company filed underneath 3312, even though they're a coal company, 3312 is what shows up over here. So remember, it's being presented as the company presents it. Let's talk a little bit about the valuation date. The valuation date is what shows up as the pricing of the stock or the share class. The cutoff date is the date of the filing. So in other words, you can have a company filing, January 31st for its December 31st information. And so that cutoff date is what you really want to pay attention to. And the cutoff date is what's going to show you the financials for a particular company. So if I typed in a valuation date of 12/31/2016 and a cutoff date of 12/31/2016, most companies haven't filed that information yet. And so it would be difficult to find their December 31st, 2016 financial statements in there. However, if I put in February 1st of 2017, that would have given them 30 days to file that information. And so as the expert, you're going to have to play with this cutoff date to make sure that you're getting the information you want to see. Was it known or knowable at the date of valuation? And you'll have to decide what information it is that you want to see. So if you make both of these 12/31/2016, then that information was not published yet and you would not have been able to see it, so you can put it in there. However, if you put in like 12 or 2-1 or 3-1, you would say, hey, those year-end financial statements, the information was available, we just haven't had a chance yet to put it together and publish it, and so I'm going to use that information. That's the call you get to make as the expert. So let me show you, once you have a selection here, how the records part works, and then I'll come back and talk about the detailed search in a moment. So if I click on a couple of items here, those are the records that are going to download when I go into downloads. I click on selected records and those 3 items show up. If I come back over here to the current records and I want to pick up this one here that has the coal industry. So let me clear my search and let me put in the information here for steel. I click on search and I get some overlap inside of here and other pieces of information come on. So I can come in here and select items that weren't there before. And when I come over here to the selected records, all of those will show up here. If I don't want to download a particular selected record, for instance, this one here had to do with coal, I just uncheck it. Whatever's check marked in the selected records is what's going to show up in the fundamentals download and in the multipliers download. So let's go back to the detailed search. The detailed search will allow us to search at a more deep level than the standard search. So if you really want to try to focus in on something, you can do that. Obviously, the same SIC code, NAICS, and description show up. The valuation date shows up. So we have to have a valuation date and we have to have a file date. So let me go to the next. But let's say that I want a particular ticker symbol. I know that Caterpillar is something I want to look at. So if I type in CAT here and I press on search, I will get the information where ticker symbols have CAT in it, and then I can select Caterpillar as my particular item, and when I go over to the selected records, Caterpillar will show up inside of those selected records. The sector information over here is pretty interesting as well. So if I want to look at a particular sector, I can choose what sector it's in, then I can choose what industry it is in, and then I can choose steel and iron, and then I can press search. I should probably pull that CAT out, or it's going to try to pick that up too. And I press search, and so now I get all of the segment in here with steel and iron, and so I can use this information to pull that in. The assets, revenue, and market cap will allow me to sort for orders of magnitude, is the way I learned it. So if I want to find all companies with assets between X and Y, I can put that in there as a low and high, and the same with revenue and market cap. So I come over and I choose my selected records. If I don't want CAT and I don't want GFB, I can delete those. Once I have the companies I have listed here, and I can select up to 20, I believe it is, then I put in a valuation date, a cutoff date, and I can download my information. I go into fundamentals and a box will come up. The selected data period, annual, quarterly, year-to-date, or trailing 12 months. I can select any of those information and it will give me 5 columns of data, 5 periods, 5 quarters if I choose quarterly, 5 year-to-dates if I choose year-to-date, and I can get that information. Typically, we're going to select annual. I can select one or more of the statements. If I don't want to see the cash flow statement, I don't have to see it. If I want to see ratios, I can check mark on that as well, and some of the typical ratios will be calculated. And then I can select the rounding level. Whole dollars, thousands, millions, billions, however you want to drop that out into your spreadsheet. When I click on export, it can take a couple of minutes here for the information to be pulled from the different data pulled from the server farm out there. And what we're doing is we're going out there and we're searching for CMC and pulling the information in and generating a spreadsheet with that. So I can save the file or I can open the file inside of Microsoft Excel. Once that file opens, I can press my Enable Editing and I can see the different income statements, and you can tell that there's a trailing 12 month here. There's a 5 periods of the 8/31 financial statements coming down on this, so their fiscal year end is 8/31, and they had a trailing 12-month or a quarterly period filed, and I can get that information in here as well. The balance sheet comes across for the same periods. Obviously, there's no trailing 12 months, and the cash flow statement and the ratios. You should scroll down on these pages, because as you scroll down, there's more information down here, and it can show you what the different ratios are and how the different ratios are being calculated. Same would go for the income statement. As you scroll down on the income statement, you can see that we have a common size income statement for this particular public company. The contents over here will help you organize those 20. If I click on the hyperlink, it'll take me to this particular statement, and then I can click in cell A1 and I can get back to the table of contents. Source of the data is Tagnifi, as we said before. The second way to get the data is to use the multiplier sheet. When I click on that, it will search for those 4 companies that I have selected, and it can take a couple of minutes for it to go out and get this data. Again, we're going out to the server farm and pulling all of this information in. I can open it with Microsoft Excel. After I've opened it in Microsoft Excel, I have the contents page with a few instructions over here. And let me go through this as we work ourselves from left to right on the sheet tabs. The input. This information here is where you would input the subject company so that it can be compared to the public companies that you've downloaded. The summary year end. This information along here is where the public companies are coming in at, and you can see what their different market capitalization is, their sales, and then the subject company information, had I typed that in, would show up in this here, and then I can see where I might want to select the different multiplier. There's one for year-end information, and there's one for trailing 12 information. Each ticker symbol is set up with its own page. There can be up to 20 of them. At the top is the ticker symbol itself, gives you the name of the company, and then there are different prices that come in to the data. There's the low for the day, there's the high for the day, and there's the close for the day. You can also see what an average is. You can choose whichever price you feel is appropriate. The default is the closing price for the day. There are 2 models to get to the numerator. The first model is where they take information from the financial statements themselves and apply that. And then we have a more specific model where the expert can get more specific if there's different layers of equity, different tranches of equity. So the shares outstanding are the diluted shares outstanding on the financial statements. We multiply it against the closing share price to come up to a value. If there's any preferred stock, we take that in at book value. That gives us a market capitalization. To come up with the market value of invested capital, we have to add back the long-term debt as well. So we go out to the financial statements, we take the current portion of long-term debt, the long-term debt, add that on. And then we subtract out the cash and cash equivalents. Those also are coming from the financial statement, and that gives us the market value of invested capital. The default is to use the Model 1. However, over here in the second box is Model 2. And if there are different layers, different tranches of equity, for instance, there's 2 types of common stock, one's voting, one's non-voting. Typically, those are going to have the same price, but they may not. There's also different layers of preferred. Some companies have this kind of preferred that's convertible to debt, convertible to stock. Others have preferred that is not convertible to debt only. And you can see what the different tranches might be. These blue font cells you can type over the top. This box over here is where you would type in the price of each one of those tranches of stock, and you can put in the shares outstanding. And then it goes through the same calculation. Whatever you choose would be the selected market value of invested capital. That's where we're driving to on these particular multiplier sheets, is market value of invested capital. The denominator, we pull out from the trailing 12 on the second column and the last fiscal period on the first column, and we work our way down to figure out how to calculate EBITDA, EBIT, tangible book value, and gross profit. Note that there's no tangible book value for trailing 12 months. And then in the last box, we actually do the do the math, and we divide the market value of invested capital by the base: sales, EBITDA, EBIT, tangible book value, and gross profit. First column is for the latest fiscal period, and the second column is for the trailing 12-month period, and that would be your multiplier. This information over here on the side, it's telling you where we received the information from, how we calculated it. So at this point, I would like to conclude our conversation about the Guideline Public Company database with Tagnifi data inside of it. We hope that you use this, and we hope that it's useful in your practice. Thank you.